we'll get started at 7:05 p.m. Thank you for coming out on this rainy evening. For those of you who are, the meeting's called to order, and we'll do the roll call. For those of you first joining us, my name's Craig Radow. I'm on the Studio City Neighborhood Council. I'm the Public Safety Chair. There are many members of the Neighborhood Council in attendance tonight. They will weigh in, but unless they're on the Public Safety Committee, they cannot vote. Then we bring the issue in front of the entire board. We'll be voting on at least one or two motions tonight. I'm going to do the roll call. Craig Radow, I am here. John Croteau, he's unexcused absence. Marcia Newman. Here. Michael, how do you say your last name?
Piscatelli.
Piscatelli.
Couldn't pronounce
Here.
it.
Patty Kirby.
Here.
And there we go.
That's all.
So we have 4 voting members, and 3 will need to pass a motion. So first we'll approve the minutes from the last meeting we had here, the January 30th Public Safety Committee meeting. I sent you each the minutes. Were you able to review it?
Yes.
Do you approve?
Yes. Approve.
Okay. Welcome.
Hey, Ron.
Ron, join us up here, please.
He's fresh from South America.
Right, your first day back from vacation.
Yeah, down in beautiful Patagonia.
Wow.
It was really pristine.
Happy to be back.
Yeah.
To the rain.
So we're just getting started, some opening remarks and touch on a few things. First, so Todd Gilman, he's coming from another event this evening. He will be here in a little bit, so we'll just reverse the order of some of the agenda items. He apologized. His boss called him in to speak at another forum, and it'll just be a little delayed, but he is definitely expected. We record these meetings. You know, we get moderate-sized turnouts for various reasons, but we do record these meetings, and the viewership's quite impressive. Members of the community do watch. Remember our earthquake presentation?
They're still watching it.
They're still watching that presentation of what you need to do. It's on YouTube right now, of what you need to do in case of emergency, and some great preparedness tips that I actually used as well. So I do recommend watching that. So that is why it's being recorded. We're doing some good work here in the committee. We're beginning to build some traction, and we're working on a proposal to get more officers for North Hollywood Police Department and the Van Nuys Police Department, and we'll get into that in just a moment. A couple of other things worth pointing out. Many of you might know that the police chief, Charlie Beck, is retiring, I believe in June, and they are currently in the process of finding a new police chief to fill his role. Personally, I think for the Valley, it's probably good news. We've been a bit underserved, in my opinion, in the Valley for quite a bit of time, and I think Chief Beck, though he's done a great job in many respects. Some people feel otherwise, of course. I think for the Valley, we've been underserved. So I am hoping the next police chief will be more focused in the area crime in our neighborhoods. So I bring that up because they have been holding town halls across the city over the last month or so. The town halls have been poorly attended. The one that I went to in Van Nuys Satellite City Hall, is that what they call it, Eric? The Satellite City Hall. was the most attended with 35 people. I did have a chance to speak pretty much on behalf of Studio City and other Valley communities that I do feel we're being underserved, and I do feel the next police chief needs to do more on our behalf. So I spoke that the tone of many of the other comments were not positive towards the police, and you could imagine, you could actually watch, it's under the police commission, they have the videos, and you could see the comments from each of these town halls. The next one will be in, I believe, the first week of April. Oh, great.
We went to one.
Did you go to one?
We did, in Canoga
Tuesday,
Park.
April 3rd.
Ah, perfect. So Tuesday, April 3rd, now they're branding it with the councilman. So David Rue, the council member for Toluca Lake and Hollywood, will be hosting it with the police commission. Welcome. On April 3rd, Tuesday. Now, I'll leave that right here. But the reason I bring it up is it gives everyone in Studio City the chance to voice their concerns and reiterate that we need more officers here. Our officers need more support. The more ways we could share that, the better. So I will leave that.
They still have, there was a survey they were also doing.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I believe it's still open, and I did post it on Nextdoor. So if I could find it, but if you type Craig Radow and survey, or if come see me, we'll pass this around. The survey, you could also weigh in on your feelings of the next commissioner, chief, and in that survey, I put how I felt that we need more resources, of course. And I kept on, need more for the Valley, need more for the Valley. I mean, we all just have to speak louder and try to make that happen. So we'll pass around the sign-up sheet, and then I'll send that survey out to everyone
May I make a comment about that?
in a moment.
And the sign-up sheet is for,
Just attendance sign-up, general attendance. But if you're interested in the survey, I could put a star next to your name. I know, Ron, you're aware of it. I also wanted to mention that last night was the neighborhood council's board meeting, and one of the items that I put on the agenda was in regards to the budget advocates. We're in budget season right now. The new fiscal season, I believe, starts July 1st for the city. And the budget advocates for the city put together their recommendations for the 2018-2019 budget. In my opinion, I thought, and it was shared by the board last night, it passed about almost unanimously. Eric was a dissenter. But
That's his rule.
right. But basically, it was very detailed bullets for the LAPD section on what they need for the 2018-19 budget. And refreshing my memory here, but additional resources for outreach, money for outreach. And what I liked about it this year was very specific on the things they needed. Last year's budget, it was quite vague. They say we need more resources, we need more money, but this year it had dollars next to it. It said we need to raise our police force to 12,500. That would be about a, what, 2,500, 3,000 raise. We need more patrol. So the reason I'm pointing this out is I'm hoping to start a bit of I'm working with Peter on this, a bit of a letter writing campaign that the community could also support this budget advocate motion. And then we can get in front of the council members, so when they vote for the upcoming budget, they know where we stand with that issue. So look for more information on that, and also send that out via email. So those are my comments that I wanted to touch on. And now we'll open it up to everyone in attendance tonight. If something that's worrying them, troubling them, something that needs to be put on our radar, this is time for public comments.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Karen. I don't want to sound horrible, because I do have a good heart, but the homeless situation, I live over on Vineland in Ventura, right Walgreens on Fruitman. And I have a dog, a little French bulldog. And we live in a condominium, we own it, you know, it's a great building. The alley, right behind the Walgreens. Every day, every night, they have their carts and they park them in our guest spots and they're shooting up, they're smoking crack, they're defecating in our spots. I've called the police. One of this, a homeless person somehow got into our building, in the stairway, which he could have gone anywhere into any of the units at this point in time. And he set up shop. And there I come walking out with my dog because I go out the back door. And thank God I looked before I even let him go down another couple of flights of stairs. There was syringes. He was fixing, there's spoons. I mean, I've got pictures. It freaked me out that this guy was in our building. I called the police. It took them an hour to get there. But my dog almost stepped on the syringes. I mean, I've got in the picture, and the guy's backpack and his clothes were there, and a flashlight was still on, and an aluminum can where he was fixing his drugs, and foil, and a bag of syringes, and it's disgusting. And I called the police, and I said, you need to get here because this guy is somewhere, but somewhere, because drug addicts do not leave their drugs. I'm sorry, they just don't. So he's somewhere and he's coming back. And an hour, and I called again, but across the street, this is weird. So I was talking to my mom waiting for the cops to show up. And my mom says, oh, hey, across the street at the mobile gas station, there's 5 cop cars dealing with some guy that they have on the ground. I said, oh, I'll go run over there. Go running over there. And this woman, officer, sees me coming at her, and I said, excuse me. I started to tell her what happened, and I said, I think that's the guy. I think that's the guy. That stuff is in our... you can't be here. It's not him. It's a whole other ballgame here. I said, no, I'm telling you, this is the guy. You need to go. And she literally shooed me away. And I said, well, I called you guys to come over here. They couldn't have been more like, get out. Who cares? Then they all left, except for one officer taking the guy in the car. And I still ended up waiting another 45 minutes. And when the police got there, they said, there's nothing we can do. We'll clean up, but we don't know what to do with them. We get calls all the time, and we just don't know where to put them. They're everywhere. And I said, but you've got to do something. Is there something you guys can do? Because they're literally everywhere on this corner. And I don't know what to do because I feel like I've got other neighbors who've got kids. They're walking their dogs late at night, and we can't even walk our dogs. I found a guy on our stoop with a crack pipe with his pants down, literally, like, on our stoop. In the morning, I go walking out. He's there like this, a couple dollar bills, 2 crack pipes, some crack, his pants down to here. And I said, hey, buddy, get up. And he gets up, and he literally does this. We've got kids in our building, kids across the street. He looks at me, he pulls his pants like completely down, readjusts himself, looks at me, and then pulls them up, and then takes the head off his crack pipe and goes back to sleep on our stoop. I called the police. An hour and 45 minutes. And you know what they did? Sir, get up. You need to go.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
What do we do?
This is the public comment part. We can't technically respond, but we could
Take note.
Am I
We
the
can
only
take
one
notes.
that
No,
has-
no, no.
Absolutely not, but we have to take the comments from everyone. We can't respond back. This is
But
your
what we
time.
want to do is, take a note of where it is. It's right behind Walgreens.
I live on Fruitland, and it's the corner of Fruitland and Vineland. There's a Walgreens, there's a Shell, then the Rite Aid and all that. Okay, you know.
We know.
And then the mobile. And it's the Walgreens, that alley, that goes to the pub, which is another issue. No parking on our street. They're drunk driving because of all the football games at 10 o'clock in the morning. They come speeding down our street. I've almost been hit 8 times. And finally I got pissed off and I kicked this guy's car because he almost hit my dog. And he stopped, he started yelling at me. And I said, you were going 80 miles an hour down our street at 9 o'clock in the morning. Because also people use that street as a shortcut to go to Wrightwood. So they're speeding down that street. We've asked for, what are those
Speed
things
bumps.
called?
Speed bumps.
That's like almost impossible. So, let me just say that I'm really sorry to hear that you were ignored by the officer. And, we probably, I don't know if you got her name or whatever, but it's just, the whole situation. So maybe see us afterwards. It's nothing we can really do directly here, but we can start
We
remedying.
have here tonight, I want to introduce Ron Drescher and Ben Lupus.
Then loop them.
Lupo. I'll get it right once.
That's all right.
And Patty, not only does she sit on the Public Safety Board, but they're also on CPAB. And they're CPAB Community Police Advisory Board, and they work very closely with Captain Graham, and they talk to him very frequently. So the comments in that location will be pointed out to him, you can be sure. Fred.
So,
And for those of you
We're
just
seeing
joining,
something here.
excuse me, for those of you just joining us, Todd Gilman's a little delayed. He's expected to be here closer to 8 p.m. He's coming from another event, so.
so I total empathy for this. But here's something that kind of it fits into all this, but we were going to Bonds at Ventura and Laurel Canyon.
No,
That was the supermarket we were going to, but the homeless situation there now at night, and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So we moved over, started going to Ralph's on Coldwater and Ventura. So it's getting more populated by homeless people. One night, a couple weeks ago, I was there with my dog at 11 o'clock. I come out of the supermarket, and I hear that like, someone's walking, went through the detector that identified theft, and I turn around, there are these 2 guys, if you ever saw Breaking Bad, it was right out of Breaking Bad, and they're carrying all sorts of groceries and even flowers, I guess, for their girlfriends, and they walk out, and I turn around looking at this, and one of them gets in a brand new Camaro next to my car, the other one gets into a van next to his, and then a woman runs out chasing them, and she starts writing down his license plate, and this guy puts the window down in the Camaro, and I'm, quote, he says, "Fuck you, this is a stolen car." So, like, fuck you, who cares? And he just nonchalantly drives away, and the van follows him. And I was thinking,
They're
he
so
could have
cool.
pulled a gun on me on his way and robbed me or whatever. I'm going to the supermarket at 11 o'clock at night and I have to deal with this stuff.
Seriously.
And inside they told me, I didn't tell them until next time I went there, they said, this happens all the time. And they said, whether or not it's accurate, he says, there's nothing we can do about it. So this is.
And they know it.
This is beyond,
Well, the Walgreens.
what you're talking about. So
Yeah.
it's going to the supermarket.
The
So-
Walgreens, and I'm not gonna say his name, but one of the workers in there was cleaning the restrooms. He got pricked by something, and it happened to be a syringe, and he had to go on AIDS medication for a year. At his work, cleaning the bathrooms. There, 3 weeks ago, some crazy came in from the front, booked in, jumped on the counter in the pharmacy, jumped over, scared the ladies there, my chemists, who I love. They were like, what? this guy, because I was at the front of the counter, and this guy came, jumped on the counter, went over, scared the shit, tried to grab stuff, screaming, and then jumped back around. They called the police, and he came around to the front counters, jumped on the counter, started waving his arms, grabbed shit, and ran out. And the cops got him down the street. So that happens. It happens every day. I was in there, and some lady comes walking in going, "Are you gonna give me any free shit?" And they're like, "No, lady." And she goes, "Yeah, well, F you." And she grabbed some stuff and just walked out. And they called the police. They never showed up.
The good news is Marcia has volunteered to start dealing with the corporate offices of these businesses and to point out these
It's
type of things, because we're
scary.
well aware.
It's very scary.
Any other public comment?
I got one
Yeah.
response. The challenge is the court system and the police, and I'll give you an example. Like, if you steal under $950, it's a misdemeanor. The jails are overcrowded, so the judge will say, okay, you're guilty. They'll sentence you for 6 months, and you're out in 2 days. And the police know that, so they know they're gonna spend a half a day processing the person, and they'll be out in 2 days, and even if they're repeat offenders.
I heard that.
And
so-
Todd will
They don't
speak
even
more to
arrest them,
that.
right?
Well, the thing
Under
is,
900.
like Target, I won't mention which one, some of the stores don't even report it because they
Too
know they
bad
have
Todd can't
to
hear all
send
this.
somebody there and they're gonna be
It
out
could
in
be
2 days
repeated.
and come back.
He's
They
well aware.
literally will take a
I'm
backpack
gonna make
and
a
load it
comment
up and
about
have a calculator and still under
It's a
900.
little limited.
The thing that I would recommend to do is you get a hold of, you get a hold of your council member, because it needs a change in the law, that this is not a misdemeanor, this is a felony.
Well, I just found
Well,
out
you know,
that
Because that would
these
comment, you can't comment.
these people can actually, now this is what the 2 police officers that came to the house with that guy in the thing. Do you know that it's now a misdemeanor to have, basically, because depending on what your tolerance is, that if I have a bad drug problem and I have a heroin problem and I go through about 5 to 10 grams, I can actually carry that on me, and I could go shoot up. I could shoot up right here in
That's
front of you
only
guys.
misdemeanor, right.
Misdemeanor.
Right, and they'll be out in 2 days.
They won't even process them.
Well,
Did you know they said that was because of the weed law that they passed? And I was like, I didn't vote for
it
that.
really doesn't have anything to do with that. It has everything to do with Proposition 47, 57, and 8109, which reduced a lot of these crimes to misdemeanors, and then the jails being overcrowded, so if it's a nonviolent crime, they let them out. So,
All right,
And that's
so
why they're all
so the only thing I can recommend is you know,
councilmen.
get your councilman, get your city council, your state, and you, they get enough complaints.
Are you familiar with Jessica in the councilman's office? She's the Studio City representative. We could give you all these emails.
Okay,
And
good.
you could copy me on the email, and,
I'm done. I'm overcooked with
Yeah.
this. I am seriously, I'm at my wit's end where I can't walk my dog in Studio City. I grew up here.
yeah,
I went
we
to
know.
Colfax.
We're all frustrated, trust me. Yes,
Is there, I mean, obviously, this is all connected with the opioid crisis that we all know about, and the homeless tsunami that's hit Los Angeles. Is there some empirical data that says, particularly with crime and misdemeanor break-ins, that says we now, our problem, at least in Studio City, is X amount more than it was 10 years ago? Or, because you hear these horror stories, like you're telling me, I believe that I'm up on Sunset, we have the infamous bridge, with the hotel
Oh, yeah.
underneath. So I'm well aware of these problems, I see it too.
and it's not improving up there?
It is, because we forced the homeowner,
Yeah.
the landowner to chain link and enforce it.
You worked very hard on that.
But I mean, it was like, it was pulling teeth, but, it was like, you don't take no for an answer when you're trying to enforce security. We also, we went to some strange things to stop people from living under there. We ordered skunk oil. I'm not
What
kidding.
is it?
We
Skunk
ordered
oil?
skunk oil from a place in New Hampshire.
great.
Interesting, yeah.
And we just took it down and threw it down there. Now, the problem, if you do too much, the area is uninhabitable,
Yeah.
and some of the neighbors smelled it. But then again, we got rid of the homeless for a while, it was non-toxic, doesn't hurt anybody, and for at least a week or two, you broke their habits of living there. It was enough time to get the chain link in place, and the word on the street was, that's not a good place to go, you can't sleep there, because you can't, it stinks. But my original question was, you're hearing all these horror stories, and you read about them in the paper. Is it really worse than it was 5-10 years ago?
Correct. I think it is.
Oh, yes.
I think it
Not
is.
when you're counting, because since they don't count misdemeanors anymore, because they're not misdemeanors, they're actually saying there's less crime, because all that stuff is not counted.
When was that change made?
We voted it.
About 2 years ago, 2.5
2 years ago, so these heroin possession, opioid possession became.
It's a misdemeanor.
I think Todd will probably be able to answer all those questions for
Yeah.
us
Yeah,
tonight.
Craig, I have something on that for you.
Yes.
There is empirical evidence. There's a lot of empirical numbers. One thing we're not short of is numbers and statistics. The problem is that we're measuring different things now.
Exactly.
We used to measure gang violence and a lot of the more conventional Part 1 crimes. We are now dealing with non-Part 1 quality of life issues. So that's not very well measured. The problem with the quality of life issue is that there's been a long series of court decisions that have been ruled in favor of the homeless, because homeless advocates, particularly plaintiff attorneys, have been highly successful in relaxing all of the laws to where homelessness is, every form of homelessness and every form of behavior that's been described here is not illegal. So when the police don't arrive, it's like saying, I put on a pot of coffee, because that's not illegal either. The police are not getting there because they can't do anything, because the voters took away the powers to do anything about those things. So it's not like the police are trying to ignore you. It's what are they going to do if they arrive in 2 seconds? If they 2 seconds after you hang up, they are there, there's no difference. The voters and the courts have decided they cannot do anything about it. So it's up to us to do something about it legislatively. And right now, I'm not sure it's looking all that good, because a lot of people in Los Angeles are people of good conscience and they want to help the homeless. So that's where we are.
Have them come to Studio City and deal with our homeless. They were fun. That's what the cops actually told me. They said to me point blank, stop giving them money. Stop giving them money. The problem is in Studio City, there's money, there's this and that, and people with big hearts and blah, 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 so they give them money. So what do? They get, they go down there and they go, oh, come to Studio City.
I have a
Because that's where all the
solution for
money
you.
is.
I have
Kathy?
one solution for you. The sign, usually we put them at businesses, private property, no trespassing, no
We got
loitering.
cameras, we got everything.
No,
We got 'em all.
but this allows the police under municipal code 41.24 saying that violators will be prosecuted. And they will come and they will arrest them for loitering or going into private property.
if you have a
You
sign.
must have the sign posted and you must register
But
it
won't
with
they
the
then be back
police.
on the street in a couple of days?
Well, of course.
You call them, I mean, this is what you can call them.
May I jump in?
Or if they come by and they see them, they can just, without your,
Situation.
you don't have to call
on
them.
the side, and we have cameras.
It has to say these words
Can I
though.
see that?
Yes.
Maybe you
It
could
has
take
to
a
say
photo.
Very specific words. We
Yeah,
actually
very
have to
specific
adjust them.
word.
We took down the cheesy no trespassing signs.
Okay.
Take a picture of it, Mr.
Yeah.
They
Chairman.
read them. They can see when it has that
Okay.
municipal code on there.
This is the thing that I wanted to bring up,
Okay.
is that Bob
Okay.
Blumenfield from CD3
Three.
has put 2 programs for signs. Number 1, he
Where'd you
put
get that?
underneath freeway,
She's on top of it.
under freeway underpasses, since sometimes tents and stuff take up a large amount of room and you can't pass unless you go out into the traffic. He put these signs up under every underpass and tunnel in his council district. So the police, if they see somebody loitering.
So could we
or
do these-
soliciting,
make these signs?
We can do the same thing. And he
Well,
got it
Krikorian
done.
needs to do
That's a
it.
great thing to
He
do.
needs to do what?
Well, we can make,
He got it
Krikorian
done
should do
through
it.
LAPD
Well,
and
we
it's
should
the Hope
first.
team, but then
I want this
it
done.
got approved and
All
the
the businesses
DOT
should do it.
installed the signs.
Where can we get a copy of that?
Well, it was hard to find. Bob Bill's
All right, let me take a
newsletter.
photo.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, you can have this, I have it in my, the other
Michael,
thing
you
was,
wanna take a
he
photo, send it to
provided
me?
these signs, the private property, no trespassing, municipal code 41.24, free to all of his council districts, and all they had to do was,
Fred?
his staff would, help businesses that are plagued, but people overnight on their property or whatever, that the police can automatically come and move them along, or they can't, because they can't stay there.
So, like, walk us through both scenarios. If it's a business, they got this flyer, what do they have to do to get that sign up,
Well,
from what you understand?
Blumenfield is offering the signs for free.
So a
And his
physical
staff-
sign, you could pick it up?
Yeah,
or-
one sign free, it has his name on there. And the council district paid for these signs,
Okay.
and his staff is helping people sign up and register with the LAPD. And I think we should do it
So they're
too.
giving them a sign and then making them register at the same time?
Yeah.
Because you need to be registered
You need to
for the
do-
trust ring.
And you have to have the proper municipal code posted.
Okay.
all the
And
details.
now, as far as, because you make the point about under the underpasses, there's
Yeah.
a sign for that as well?
Under, the no loitering, no soliciting, entire block, municipal code 41.18.
Okay.
And he had 17 of these signs put under all of the, and we have a lot of freeway in Studio City
Yeah.
and in CD2. We have a
Absolutely,
lot.
I know.
so he funded it, so we need to get
Yes.
Krikorian to
All
fund
right,
it
so-
for
Well,
us.
it's the
Yeah.
Department of Transportation.
Oh,
So
But
the
he
signs
started,
are
who
big.
started the process, do you think? Bob Blumenfeld?
Yeah, and he worked with LAPD, the senior lead officer, and Hope.
All right, so
got it
I'll
done.
contact Jessica and I'll, in Krikorian's office, I'll CC the committee. And then maybe one of you could help pick up the dialogue
Yeah.
if need
And
be.
I-
And I'll copy
Yeah,
you as
pass
well.
it
And
I
I
wanna
think
take a photo of that.
David Brew is
Michael's gonna
already doing
email it to
that,
us.
the no loitering signs under the freeway underpasses for Sherman Oaks and the rest of his district
Okay.
also.
That's a very good, thank
So,
you. You always come with good ideas,
We don't want
Catherine.
to be left, the last ones with the signs, I think.
If there's no more public comment, we're gonna move on, a couple of
I have
other
a quick,
business things. Eric?
Yeah, I would just make a short public comment. One is that it's very harrowing to hear that experience, and, I'm very sympathetic. What a terrible situation. And I think that, it sounds like you're in a building where there is a lock, but someone moved in when somebody opened the door and left it ajar, because locks matter in this space. And, I'm not sure what to do with these sorts of drug addicts. It makes you imagine, like, in the olden days, in a neighborhood, there would be like a gang that took care of that nobody could come in to the neighborhood and behave that way, where they would be roughed up by vigilantes, which I'm not recommending. And the police force is not strong enough to be in every spot. So it's very worrisome. But one thing that does matter is security in the facilities. And I know that, like, Walgreens, if a lot of the activity is happening at Walgreens, I think somebody's gonna write to that's a very powerful tool, because they are, we share interests with the businesses, and they should. I was once at Gelson's, and a guy tried to rob Gelson's, and came out, and the security guard was there, and tried to arrest him, and then I think you remember this in the Daily News, there was like a resident who tackled the guy and saved the day. So, there's no doubt that people don't want this kind of nonsense in our community. But security guards make a difference, and I feel like they should be discouraged. I mean, I know they are, and I know we've got the rock and roll, the Ralphs, and all the difficult situations. But I think it's great that you're recording these meetings. I'll wrap it up. I just want to say that at our neighborhood council, I am on the board. Disclosure. We frequently have issues that matter, and I think it's great that we try to make recordings. And I was hoping that the other committees in our neighborhood council, this is one that is really exemplary, because I know a lot of people pay attention, and if they can't make it to the meetings, I think even an audio recording is good, but this is even a video recording. Makes a huge difference, and you invite a lot of people in the community to participate, and I hope that our other committees will do the same thing, because I really admire the work that's being done in the Public Safety Committee. Even though we don't always agree on everything, and AB 109 and Prop 47, Prop 57 have put us in a different situation, but I'm hopeful that the solution is not necessarily, I mean, some of these people, you know, you can incarcerate, but you can't really incarcerate them forever. So we need a better solution, because this is not the solution. Living in the yard is not the solution. You know, I once joked, a lot of them are alcoholics, you know, we should have a booze cruise. And that'll get them out of the neighborhood, because they'll go for but I appreciate the work you're doing. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. We're going to move on to a motion right now. Item number 6, presentation, discussion, and possible motion regarding Los Angeles Municipal Code, Section 85.05 in regards to the vehicle dwelling. I'm going to read the motion, then we'll open for public comments, and then the committee could each make a comment, and then we'll vote. So, the Studio City Neighborhood Council strongly supports the extension of the new Los Angeles Municipal Code 85.02 vehicle dwelling. The code, effective since January 7th, 2017, currently allows fines to be issued to persons dwelling in vehicles on residential streets and within 1 block of parks, licensed schools, preschools, and daycare facilities between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. Without an extension, this code will expire on July 1st and potentially allow sleeping in vehicles anywhere and anytime in Los Angeles. So we'll open up to public comments. Anyone want to add anything?
Greg, Ron and I are going to be meeting with City Attorney Mike Fewer about this on Wednesday.
Okay.
And the word that we're getting from the city attorney is that he is interested in extending it. But I've heard words like that previously. The pressure needs to be on right up until we get an absolute extension, an indefinite extension, until there's a better solution. The hazard here is that homeless advocates will attempt to make some sort of compromise. Well, let's say, well, can you extend it? We'll extend it, but just for a few months. And we're going to have to continue to do this. So we have to press very hard for an indefinite extension of 8502. The word that I'm getting is that the city attorney is in favor of it, but we're going to find out. We'll report back to you after we.
So should we have the word indefinite?
Yeah. So I think without an indefinite extension, possibly add that. Any other public comments?
Yeah, it's unbelievable, it's everywhere. You see more and more of these RVs, you can tell they bought them at a disposal sale or something. In the past 6 to 12 months, it's blowing my mind. They
We
just
have
are
3
popping
on the
up
street.
everywhere.
We have 3 on Fruitland.
Was
Is
that?
not included on the no parking?
It is.
We don't have signs on Fruitland telling you that
It's a red zone.
you could park all day long for 6 months without getting a
You
ticket.
can't park over there, right?
No, it's all on a map. It's all, every
It's a
single
red zone when
street
it's in
has
residential
a
area.
designation.
Yeah.
I don't know, but there's 3 of them that have been there since I moved
The
there.
map is
5
very
years.
difficult to find, and you'll have to call.
No, there's 3, and then there's a woman that has 3,
She should contact Sean.
minivans.
Until April
And
16th.
she's a hoarder, obviously. And she's got 3 of her cars. One's a minivan, one's a Jeep Cherokee, and they're filled. And I looked into the car, and there's
It's not an
there's
RV.
bugs in the donuts that have
Yeah.
been there for months. And she drives up in another car, goes through it, shuts the door, and gets in her car, and then she does it 3 days later, but she just moves it from, like, after a month and a half to 2 months. She'll move the car just on the other side of the street, and then moves it back.
Well,
And
we should check the maps for you.
okay.
See us after. We'll give our cards and who to connect to.
Do you feel like the fine is effective?
I can't. This is your comment time. This
Well,
this
I
can't.
guess well, it's a question. I mean, I just don't know. You said that currently, the law that you wish to have extended is indefinitely, has a fine for violation of this, for parking, for living in an RV.
It's also a towway. so that the vehicle can be towed.
Oh, that was my question.
And I have seen that on Havenhurst Avenue.
So you can't get blood from a turnip. I mean, you're gonna.
No, they're
Fine,
not,
homeless
no one's
person.
expecting to collect the $271. It's the vehicle can be towed. Now, there's another problem with the 72-hour rule where they move it 2 inches and
Yes.
then, okay, so we're gonna also tell the city attorney that we wanna change this to 200 yards or more.
That's really far, but
It's less than 300 yards.
Well, it's less than a half a mile.
it's gonna get shorter, right? So might as well start out with 200 yards.
We need to have that changed. I don't know whether that's a vote or anything, but we're gonna talk to Mike Fewer about that as well.
Looking at the language that we currently have, is there any recommended changes? After we vote on this, it will go to the wider board. If the wider board approves it, it will become a community impact statement. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, 2 comments. The agenda that you sent out.
Yeah.
If you click on the Los Angeles Municipal Code link on here, you go down to North Hollywood police station. You click on there, the map shows up. It shows you all the.
Yeah. In the original email, it's highlighted. You have an electronic copy. If you
Yeah.
click on that link and scroll down, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
And my question is, are religious institutions working with nonprofits for safe overnight parking that are in that area, are they exempt from that code? So there's some nonprofits that are working.
I think we can ask Todd.
I'm not sure I understood that
Parking
question.
Let's, yeah,
Or, I was just curious if that was, I didn't read the.
let's hold that for Todd. That's a good
This is
question.
for street parking.
Yeah,
That's for parking lots.
that's a part, so it's parking lot, is anybody exempt from it then? Even though it's in the area?
If a church, can a church allow RVs into their parking lot?
There
right?
are some churches doing that, but I think Todd will address that tonight.
Eric?
And there might be some parking lots with meters, I don't know.
I think that's a great question, because whereas I understand we don't want a RV in front of your home, for example, and it can be intrusive and the law doesn't support it, but citing someone for that, again, you may not be interested in collecting the 271, but what happens to that person's vehicle is that, then it gets a smart boot applied, which they've been doing a pilot program since August. You'll be happy to hear this group, that 10,000 smart boots have been applied since August 2017 alone. And so this is just a pilot program, so I think that the official police garage really likes this program. And what a smart boot is, I don't really know, to be honest. I think I know what an old boot is, but I think the smart one has a very good clicker and counts the money and makes it very difficult financially for whoever it is. So with that in mind, obviously, I don't think anybody's interested in going around, people who are forced to live in a vehicle. And a lot of the people are not in, RVs. They're people who would be much more, you'd be surprised, who are just not able to come up with the $2,500 to live around here or anywhere. So they live in a vehicle, and it's sad, but they're not so creepy. But they get nailed too, because everybody gets nailed somewhere or other. And then it's just, as you say, taking blood from a stone, which I don't think is a great strategy. So getting to the positive note, where are these places where those individuals who are in between here and there can go? That would be a great solution for some of I realize we're busy staking out our own backyards so that people are not climbing in the corridor, but that is a policy issue that needs to be addressed. And I always thought, what about Valley Plaza? You've got that, why can't they just direct the cars to that old park? Now it's a big development coming, but there are big empty places where you go, what the hell's going over there? Isn't there some way that it could be a little bit more accommodating? Because again, not on my street would be my answer. I don't want it. I know none of us do, but we got to find some place because, or just we could try what other people have done. Send them to another city. Give them a boarding pass. That's what I read in an article. They're sending people here.
It was in that survey you discussed. That
Yeah.
was one of the choices.
Yeah.
Should we get bus tickets? It wasn't.
Okay.
I'm not
Yeah, I
advocating for
sent you that
that per se, but I think,
Did say that, Catherine.
I'd like to comment that this municipal code has helped my neighborhood greatly. So there's some remedy for residents that have an RV or a big van parking for weeks in front of your place or something, and a little guy pops out with a bicycle and goes around with its backpack, you know.
Or they shower from a hose.
Oh, yeah, the hose
Yeah, like
using
that.
and all that.
That's pleasant.
So this has been very, very helpful. And until the city uses their city parking lots or something to have that safe parking program, this can't go away, I think.
Yeah.
Or it can't transition until then.
Any other public comments? Marcia, oh, Brian.
So there's red zones and basically green zones. And the red zones typically are residential areas. And the green zones are industrial and business. So you can go on Ventura Boulevard and physically do what you want to do. So I don't think any of us want a bunch of vans or RVs parked in front of our house. And that's what this specifically will extend, is not allowing the homeless or people in RVs to camp out on residential
Exactly,
areas.
right.
So that's the clarity that I'm not
Or
sure.
by the schools and by the parks.
Right.
By the parks, it's helped tremendously.
Yep. Any comments in the committee? Marcia?
When I attended the police chief community meeting at Canoga Park, Fred and I went
How many people were there?
a dozen. And I did speak to the executive chairman of the police commission. So he is the paid professional. And I kind of New York shamed him. I said, New York City has a population of over 6 million. They have about 40,000 officers. We have 4.4 million, 10,000. I said, I can't imagine we're that much poorer than New York City, that we can't have appropriate number of officers. And he looked at me and he said, we can't afford any more because we give them such high salaries.
Not any higher than New York.
No, that's about
No,
the same.
here, he said their salaries are so high, that's why we can't afford any more
That's not
officers.
accurate.
Okay, but this is the statement that this
Is
fellow
this
said.
Richard Tefang?
He's the executive director of the
Marcia, is
police.
this going to tie back to vehicle dwellings?
Yeah, because it has to do with how are we gonna get more officers on the streets to help enforce these laws.
Well, that's why we're working on that
Yeah.
proposal. And we'll
All right,
get to
but
that
this-
in a moment too.
So, if this is what we're dealing, mentality like that, this is something that we have to deal with.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one very important difference. New York, I grew up in New York City. New York City is one jurisdiction, one police department for the entire 5 boroughs. It's 8.8 million people, exactly the same number of people there was 50 years ago. We in Los Angeles County have the sheriff's department and about 60 different municipalities in addition to our 10,000 Los Angeles officers. So if you add it all up, I don't even know the number, but it's far, far in excess of 10,000 officers. You're just counting the LAPD and the 4.4 million. New York and LA are not really a fair comparison. I think New York has more police than we do. But we in Los Angeles County, in our entire community, have a great deal more than 10,000 officers, not including, we also have highway patrol. There are just so many jurisdictions, you can't even name them, over 100. So I don't even know the total of sworn police persons that we have in our immediate vicinity, but it's more than 10,000.
Okay. Victoria, we have to do the committee now. Patty?
I'm good.
Michael? Victoria, fast?
I just don't figure your math there. I mean, because in Los Angeles, we're not getting somebody from Downey to come help us. We're getting an LAPD officer.
Right, but it's only the confines of, you're comparing New York City, which is 375 square miles, one jurisdiction. So that's one police department. We have a lot of other police departments, so that
Well, then
Burbank
that comes
is
down
not
to
served by.
How many police officers per capita do you have?
That's a much better question. It's per capita.
Mm-hmm.
And per capita, you could do you could do the quick math, 10,000, it's.
There's 10,000 LASD, Sheriff's Department. as well.
Right, that's right, and that's
So that's
different. So,
20 right
will the Sheriff's Department come and help you? So, you take quick 4,400 and divide that into 10, so the per capita is one officer for 440 persons.
That's sheriff?
No, that's.
Except that all 10,000 of those officers are not in cars.
That's true of every police
And the ones
department.
that are in cars are split over 3 shifts.
That's true of every department.
Okay, we're going to get back to the
Okay.
police in just a moment, but let's vote on this. I'm just checking any updates from Todd. We're going to vote on this matter. Ben, was there any language you felt strongly that should be added or updated to this motion?
It's on the
No,
second.
that sounds good.
Unless we just add
I like
indefinite.
indefinite.
Indefinitely.
Yeah, we can add
Yeah,
that.
definitely
Yeah.
is a keyword.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I think we're still good. I'll just read that last sentence and then we'll vote. Without an indefinite extension, this code will expire on July 1st and potentially allow sleeping vehicles anywhere and any time in Los Angeles. So a yes vote would support an extension. Marcia?
Yes.
Myself, yes.
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Okay. So it passes 4-0. We'll move on to the Board of the Neighborhood Council in Studio City, and then hopefully on to the City Council. So the big project this committee has been working on with the help of our guests from CPAB is a proposal for more officers and more support. Right now, it's a 17-page document.
We'll just give him mine.
Okay, Ron, here we go. This is what I emailed you, then I got some comments back, and it's been updated ever since. Just to give a brief overview, the most important point, there's an intro, of course, and then we have the support of other neighborhood councils and other communities. So, of course, Studio City, NoHo, Valley Village, we're working on Sherman Oaks and Van Nuys and Valley Glen. And this is to get more officers for both the North Hollywood Police Department and the North Hollywood Police Department Division, and the Van Nuys Division. Both those divisions touch Studio City and police Studio City. So what we're asking for is 50 additional officers assigned to each of the following police divisions, Van Nuys and North Hollywood, 50 community safety officers to supplement and assigned to the following police divisions, Van Nuys and North Hollywood, 20 civilians to fill office positions to allow the officers back on the streets, an addition of 6 patrol units to each of the divisions, and 10 additional traffic officers to each of the divisions. Then we go into, and please stop me along the way if you have an additional update or thoughts. Then we get into the population. Right now, we have population numbers for 2000 versus 2008 showing the growth. The Studio City, for example, has seen from just 2000 to 2008 a 9.3% growth. So you can imagine where it's gone in the last 10 years. Probably increases across the board. The Valley has gone up 8% from 368K to 397K, and it's probably much higher. Thanks to Rob. Is Rob on CPAB? Rob McGrath?
He's a volunteer for the LAPD, but he's not on CPAP.
Right. Rob is great with statistics and numbers, and he's been providing me with crime statistics over the last year and compared to last year at this time. And look, numbers are up. And just I'll point out one of these. It's not something you want to hear, but I will share it anyway. The North Hollywood Division currently ranks number 3 out of 21 citywide divisions among total Part 1 crimes, which encompasses both property and violent crimes. This placement, totaling 969 Part 1 crimes, ranks only behind Central Bureau's 77th Street Division and Southeast Division. So that's to give you an example of we are dealing with incidents of crime. That's the bottom line. We also received, and I don't have it here, okay, I don't have that in front of me. As part of this proposal, we've also have feedback from stakeholders. We did a Studio City public safety survey. That what it did. We received 305 responses. It was a great response, and all the feedback. I'm sure some of you, many of you in this room, filled out that survey and gave your feedback, which will be included in this proposal. We're working closely with the Police Commission, and we are hoping that this will bubble up through the Police Commission, through the mayor, through the police chief, and through our councilmen. We also got feedback from NoHo community. Nearly 250 responded to the survey there. So we're getting real community feedback in here. It's not just Craig Radow, it's not just CPAB, it's not just the neighborhood council saying it. This is real community feedback. We're working to point out moments when Studio City, Sherman Oaks have been in the news from the last year. We just dealt with a pretty horrific, brutal home invasion last month. Most of you have heard in Colfax Meadows. Wonderful woman, she kindly opened the door.
She's here.
Is Elise here?
Yes.
Hi, Elise.
Poor thing.
Do you want to speak to it? Do you want to speak to it?
Well, I don't really know what to say,
Yeah,
except
I
that
know.
I'm not in Kansas anymore. It was an error in judgment on my part. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, Sunday, and a guy showed up on my front porch asking to borrow a cell phone. And that his phone was dead, could he please borrow mine to make a call? I loaned him the cell phone, he made a couple of calls, then asked if I could get him some water. I went in, locked the door, got the water, came back, opened the door, he shoved it in my face, grabbed me, pulled out a knife, and I just fought back. That was all I knew to do. He did finally get my purse and run out the door. But the response from the North Hollywood division was incredible. I think I dialed 911 and probably within 3 minutes, the fire department was there, and within 5, the North Hollywood division was there. And they didn't just send one patrol car. I don't even know how many were out there. I think probably 5, maybe. Eventually, they brought a canine unit out, and then the forensic team came out. It was a tremendous response from the police department, and it floored me. And they were they were as professional and helpful, and I mean, they just wanted to get the guy. They have gotten him. I know you no, you didn't. Senior lead officer Sean Smith posted. They did find him because the next day after the event, detectives came out and took my statement and followed through on it. But I think they must have had just about everybody working on this case trying to get this guy. But in that process was when I learned that we have essentially one patrol unit for the entirety of Studio City, which is ridiculous. And Craig and I haven't formally met, but exchanged emails because as I said to you, whatever I can do to further the cause of getting more of a police presence in Studio City, I am happy to do. If it's as simple as going to the farmer's market and hawking for signatures, I'll do it. If there's something else I can do, I would love to be able to do something to help the community, because I had no idea we were so underrepresented, and the North Hollywood was so strapped for trying to cover the whole area of Studio City. It's just crazy.
Well, we're really grateful that you're okay, and we're grateful that he's been caught. And,
Thank you, yeah.
And I think The North Hollywood, it's frustrating on the smaller crimes or smaller incidents, they're not out immediately. And because they're short-staffed, they are out. We do hear this repeatedly, that they are out immediately on these serious issues. So,
Yeah, I'd rather have them with her than with me,
right.
you know?
Well, but it's a shame that they are so understaffed that they have to make those kinds of judgment calls when, you know, if you've got somebody on one end and somebody on the other end and both are, you know, serious issues, you want to be able to put people out.
At what point did you call 911? What did you say?
I called 911, well, when he ran out the door, I ran into the kitchen. I didn't know where my cell phone was because I loaned it to him, but I put it somewhere else. And I grabbed another phone and that phone wouldn't work, and then I saw my cell phone. So I probably lost about 3 minutes there. Then I called my next door neighbors who have 2 little girls in case he might have run into their yard. I mean, it was early, but still. So I left them a message and then I dialed 911. I was probably on the phone with 911. She said, "What's your emergency?" And I said, "A home invasion robbery." And she said, "Are you injured?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Internally, I think." And I said, "Not really." I said, "I don't know how badly injured I am, but I am injured." And she said, "Okay, we're gonna roll a unit, you know, hang on a minute." And she came back and said, "Just stay on the phone with me, stay on the phone with me." And said that they would be dispatching police. After that, everything gets kind of fuzzy because you're in hyperdrive, your mind's just flying. And I was literally pouring blood from my nose because my nose was broken. But it was pouring from inside and outside, so I was kind of a mess. But luckily, nothing that requires surgery or anything like that. It was just that when he entered, when I went to take the water and give it to him, my door is wooden and the edge of that door hit me here. So that's what caused the break. And I was really, I think, incredibly fortunate in that. So much worse could have happened in that. So it's just a reminder that security systems are useful. I don't have any, so I will be getting those. And you may or may not know there was another lady whose home he went to first. She lives about a half a block south of me. And it's a small home like mine. And she's, I think, around 80, they said. And asked her to borrow her cell phone. And if I understood them correctly, she loaned her cell phone to him as well. He did not break in because she had 2 dogs.
Yeah. The number one
They were
deterrent.
barking, and, you know, they always say dogs are great deterrents.
So just to, first of all, I'm sorry that you had to go through all that. One suggestion I would have, you can go down to Big 5 and get a can of bear spray, and that
Yes.
shoots 30 feet.
Yes.
And I would put it right next to the front door. Obviously, if you have small kids, I would feel differently. And if somebody comes in your house, you know, again, it's legal to do it. You know, if you have a gun, a lot of people will be hesitant in pulling the trigger, but the spray's not going to kill anyone, but it will immobilize them. So that would be number one. Number two, I got to be careful because I do work for the LAPD. As you probably know, I'm on the board of police commission, and I'm a judge, and I judge police officers' misconduct. But so I can't say this as an LAPD, but I can say it as a private citizen. I would recommend to have a patrol service, and the one I would recommend is ACS, and I'll tell you why. We have we live in the Donnas up in the hills. We have about 40 houses, and about half of them have ACS, and they're patrolling their area all the time because they patrol about, in the Donnas, about 4 times, but our particular street, a lot more. I can't tell you what a lot more is, but my office oversees the street. When I am at home during the day, I see them all the time. So I encourage, we have a neighborhood watch. I encouraged our more than half the people have an emergency, have a patrol service, and I encourage them all because ADT does not patrol the area.
Right.
So-
In our neighborhood, we have Post,
And-
Colfax
as well as
Meadows.
ours.
Yeah, so whatever, I get your block together and negotiate with your security company that they will patrol the street if you get a certain amount of people. And I know ACS will do it, and I can give you the person's
ACS?
contact. ACS. I'll give you the contact's name who does this. And we have had no crime since, we've had several break-ins in our street. There's a lot of construction was being done, and since that, they avoid our street.
Number one, as you said, don't open the door.
Yes.
I mean, that's.
As she knows now.
Right.
Never open the door, just acknowledge your home, because if you don't acknowledge your home,
Yeah.
they will go in the backyard and
Get a
break
dog.
in, and then you're home, and then you got home.
All right, so on the proposal, I'd like to talk about it here. You know what I'm looking for. You've been sending me information, continue to. You'll be able to look into those few news stories, Michael?
Yes, I got that, and I will be.
You'll email that to me?
Yes. 2 places to look.
We want to get the businesses involved. John Walker wasn't available for this meeting from the Studio City bid, but we're just hoping to expand this more and really get it across the valley. The more people we can get involved. I think, any other comments on that, or?
It's just that we want to just remember the flavor we had during the times of the valley succeeding from LA. That's what we need to generate to get this moving.
Yeah.
Is that passion.
Yeah,
The valley needs our share of coverage.
exactly. Okay, so Todd said he'd be here about 8:15, where we could take a break for a moment. I did put graffiti on the agenda tonight. If there was something specific, graffiti in a neighborhood, in a business, to let me know. If you have that comment,
I can make it.
open forum.
Everyone knows Sean is out on reassignment till April 16th.
Share who Sean is.
Sean Smith is our senior lead officer. Pretty much everybody here has met him, I'm sure. You did the other night. So since he's out and they have not assigned another SLO particularly, so Sergeant in charge, Amy Standish, said to send the communications to her. I did post her email on Nextdoor, but if you want it, I can give it to you now. So, for example, if we want the Hope team to come out, the Captain Graham recommended that our SLO be the one to call the Hope team for a particular area, but since we don't have a SLO, we would want to email Sergeant Standage. And then depending on her availability, or she would assign it hopefully to John Antonelli.
It seems that, am I saying it right, Lhasa?
Yeah.
It seems that they've been somewhat effective when reaching out to them for issues. There was the individual on Moore Park under the underpass. It took 3 months, but he's been removed as of last week, earlier in the week. But Lhasa was involved, the councilman's office. It seems when those two entities come together, they're able to make some movement there. So I do have contacts also in Lhasa.
Yeah. So just so you know that Officer Smith is not checking his email while he's on reassignment. So it'll go into La La Land.
Greg, just one last thing. Hope team,
Okay.
if you're going to make a request for additional officers, Hope team is actually, like Officer Smith, is being taken away from patrol to do Hope team duty for as long as 30, 60 days. So it takes away from patrol. So we need to ask for an additional 50 officers or so for Hope team in addition to the patrol officers.
that's a
If
good
we're going to
idea.
ask, might as well ask for what we need.
Right.
The Hope team, the early indications on Hope team are actually better than I thought.
terms of
Not
their effectiveness?
effectiveness, yeah. I mean, the data, I've gotten only preliminary data on this and spoke to Officer Smith about it just the other day. It's not terrible. I mean, it's beginning to be effective. Removal of the possessions, it's a 14.72 hour process. It's very, very complicated. But I would say results are significantly better than nothing, so above expectation.
Do you know the difference between HOPE and LASA?
Yeah, HOPE is an extension of the LAPD, and LAPD officers are part of the HOPE team. LASA is the social services arm and is not a law enforcement body. So they're not really related. They overlap in this particular mission.
They're a nonprofit, but supported by the funds of the city.
Right. And they seem to be working together. Timeline-wise on this proposal, and I know you want to weigh in on this, I would like to work on it really for the next 1 to 2 months. And then the conversion of the police chief, we have to decide whether we want to make our push before or after. I think that's something.
I think
we all need
Captain
to-
Graham can advise us at that point. When we're ready, I think we should just try to get ready, get
Yeah,
it done.
I mean, we can't wait much longer.
No.
I mean, to hear.
And the data's not gonna
Those
change.
statistics, that data that you had is really powerful.
Yeah.
And they had budgeted additional monies, I think, in the police department.
Well, we did get 10 more officers recently
Okay.
that were reassigned from desk duty onto the whatever. We did get 10, still not close to enough. But then, 2 or 3 are out on reassignment at a time or on vacation.
Looks like we don't have
So-
anybody here.
Or disability.
Yeah.
Another item I want to get to that's important. I'm requesting funds for Officer Appreciation Day for North Hollywood and Van Nuys Police Divisions. I talked to Sean Smith about it. He was pretty excited by the idea. He liked the idea of doing a barbecue at the police station. I wanted to do more than hamburgers and hot dogs. I said, what about steaks? He says, well, carne asada everyone likes. So,
Probably sushi. Barbecued sushi.
Only Studio City would start talking about that. I'm
I
sorry.
know, that's why I said that.
North Hollywood.
You can bring
with hamburgers.
I don't even eat it.
So we're going to put this in front of the budget committee for the neighborhood council. I'm going to ask up to $500 to, I don't think we'll spend it all, but set that aside for maybe a breakfast at Van Nuys. We could pick up bagels or do a nice spread for them and some sort of barbecue.
I'd say that I'd like you to thank all those people who don't get much exposure.
At the
Because there's a lot
station?
of people that come out and they get a lot of attention, and then there's these people who work behind the
Right.
scenes, burglary or whatever they're doing,
The sergeant,
and they don't
the
see
detectives.
anybody.
So
You know,
I hope people in this
hopefully they
room
can-
could join us that day and we
Yeah,
could help
for sure.
barbecue.
Yeah.
We'll just have to set the day. I said, look, the weekend's easier for me and probably for most people on a Saturday. It's a little less on the weekends but he said whatever day we do it, it'll be very much appreciated. But looking to do it in May.
Okay.
And on the next agenda, we'll work out the details, but that's being planned. And then we'll give it to 8:30 and it's about 12 minutes and hopefully Todd will arrive. He did say it'll be at this time. I apologize.
Do you want me to give him a call and see if he's on his way?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Who prepared to give it a, let's take a 5-minute break.
You did a good job.
Yeah, very nice. You did.
So Todd, welcome. We record these meetings because, as I mentioned to you, people do watch at home. And please ask the questions that people not here tonight will want answered. If you could give a little introduction of, your new position and where you came from.
Happy to. First of all, thank you all for having me here. Million apologies for being late. Craig is the sweetest, most professional person possible. He's like, we're going to reserve a spot for you at 7, get you in and get you out. And then literally, I think 2 minutes after he sent an email to me confirming, hey, you're good to go, here's the parking, my boss's boss's boss said, hey, there's a meeting on Thursday night. You absolutely need to go. It's from 6 to 8 in Encino. Good luck. Have fun. So I apologize for getting here so late. But thank you to Craig for the warm welcome.
Glad you could.
Thank you. So I'm a former district attorney in both Ventura and Los Angeles counties. And I've recently joined the city attorney's office as a neighborhood prosecutor. So a traditional district attorney or city attorney, they basically, they get a case from the police that comes across their desk and they prosecute it, right? Basically something really bad happens to someone, the police investigate, they believe there's probable cause to file charges. Some senior person, either at the city attorney or district attorney's office, decides, yes, we believe beyond a reasonable doubt those charges are valid. And then it hits a prosecutor's desk. And I did that for several years, and I did everything from fish and wildlife cases all the way to serious and violent felonies, attempted murders, and robberies, and carjackings, and things like that. I left a really cool job to come to an even cooler job, which is a neighborhood prosecutor. So unlike a traditional district attorney or city attorney who's on the very back end of the justice system, I'm a little bit more on the front end of the criminal justice system. And I don't handle your typical misdemeanor or felony case. I focus on two types of cases. The first type of case are what I call reoccurring problems. The type where either a person or a place just keeps coming back on the police's radar. And a person or people have been arrested multiple times and the problem doesn't seem to go away. That could be a prostitution issue, or that could be a narcotics issue, could even be as simple as a trespassing issue or an issue with a party house where the owner just doesn't care. I also work on a second type of case, which is issues that may seem small now, but could easily escalate into something really bad. And so a typical example of that would be a neighbor dispute where someone's tree keeps littering in the other person's yard. And for whatever reason, that small dispute has escalated to where the neighbors are taking restraining orders out, and there's bad blood, and one neighbor says, I can't wait to go over there with a shotgun one day. And before that neighbor actually commits murder or some awful felony act of violence, I'll try to jump in and not just mediate, but try to diffuse the situation and get the neighbors talking again. So the elected city attorney, Mike Fewer, has given me the authority and the tools to try to just solve whatever problem comes across my desk. And so kind of in a nutshell, that's what I deal with. That's it.
Good job.
Well, thanks, see ya.
Yeah, great, thanks, Ben.
Sit down.
Yeah. So Craig mentioned that you all are interested in Proposition 47.
Well, we're worried about it.
Okay, so I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I am such a data nerd. I'm a big fan of data, not necessarily emotions, driving decisions. And I'm not a politician. And I'm not here to say whether this proposition's good or this proposition's bad. That's really not my role. But I'm here to, hopefully as a person who's fairly knowledgeable about criminal law and a person who's actually taken the time to really dig into the statistics behind the laws. How are they effective? How are they not? Why the laws came into place in the first part. So I'm more than happy to talk about that. I will never, ever be able to answer the question of, is Prop 47 good or bad? And I don't think that's even the right question to ask, because when you're dealing with criminal law, it's a little bit more complicated, the shades of gray. There is no good and bad, right? There is this reasonable? Does this make sense from a policy perspective? Or should we shift away to another policy, right? It's not good or bad. There is no good or bad. So I'm happy, I've got my thoughts on Prop 47, the background behind it, what led to it, crime trends, all that sort of stuff. But I'm happy to talk.
Well, just to give you a pulse of the community right now, and everyone jump in, there's definitely an ongoing, and I've been public safety chair for now a couple of years, and the reason why I ran is I was worried about this 2 years ago. And unfortunately, it's gotten worse and accelerated in the area of crime. And we're talking crime on the level of mailbox theft, on vehicle break-ins, of course, which is huge in the neighborhood, to, unfortunately, and at least one of our neighbors, to more serious issues, home invasion and burglary. So it's things are now escalating, and that's the overall climate right now. And we feel, of course, the the LAPD in North Hollywood and Van Nuys division's underserved, and we're trying to fight to get them more officers. So tell us how you're helping us get the bad guys off the street. Let's start on the most basic.
Okay, so I don't focus on every single bad guy in North Hollywood. I don't focus on every single issue in North Hollywood. Like if you see a homeless encampment that's been there for longer than you like, don't call me about that. We have a variety of prosecutors and police and city services that will tackle that. That is a run-of-the-mill issue. We have over 1,000 homeless people in North Hollywood. We have how many thousands of crimes every single year in North Hollywood Division, which includes Studio City. Call me when it's a little bit more of an ongoing issue that just doesn't seem to go away. So that's how I help the community. So for instance, there's a gentleman, and I won't say his name, but he often will call himself Lucifer. I'm not joking. He has been convicted of, I think, 12 misdemeanor crimes, 12 or 13 misdemeanor crimes in the last 2.5 years, and they almost always occur at the intersection of Ventura and Vineland. This is a guy who
We were just talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
You need to hear hers.
Yeah.
That's my,
Exactly.
that's my corner, and I know who you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Well, there's actually 2 or 3 people at that intersection.
One guy that I know of is, yeah.
Yeah, no, and a lot of folks that I deal with have substance abuse issues, significant mental health issues, like truly significant mental health issues, where they're not at the level where the state can involuntarily take them into custodial format or hold them in a hospital. They're just below that area where they are happy to commit crimes of violence and act out in awful ways. But we can't just go over there and take them away unless there's been some sort of criminal act where the police can arrest for. So that's where I jump in. When someone has been arrested for petty theft or battery or trespass over and over and over, and they've served their time in jail, every single time they get 180 days, they get 360 days, and they keep coming back out and they keep doing it. We give them stay away orders and conditions of probation, and they just ignore them. That's where I'll jump in and try to be a little bit more creative. Obviously, I will prosecute those cases. And with Lucifer, I've prosecuted 4 or 5 of his cases at this point. And it starts by arming, and he focuses on retail employees. He has learned behavior where he knows that if he goes into the Rite Aid or the Walgreens or the Ralph's or the 7-Eleven, even the Starbucks sometimes, and takes his meal for the day, or for just for that lunch, if he acts out and says dangerous things, if he takes a swing at a store employee, they're more likely to back off. And he knows that the police take hours to arrive because at the end of the day, that's a $6 petty theft. And the police are dealing with attempted murders and robberies and traffic accidents where people are dead in the street. He's learned that behavior. And so the first thing I did is I sat down with Senior Lead Officer Sean Smith, and we formulated a plan where we went door to door to all the retailers and eventually did a bigger meeting of all the retailers in the area and basically said, hey, look, there's this gentleman who keeps doing these things. This is what, you should be careful about him. But as soon as you see him, I want you to let both of us know so we can jump on that issue right away. Don't be afraid of reporting it to the police, even though you know they're not going to come for several hours. Make sure you get the camera footage. Make sure that if he's still in the area, please point him out to the police and be willing to make a report even though the problem has gone away just for those few hours. And that seems like an obvious thing to maybe all of us here, but when you're dealing with a security guard who is frankly not making nearly enough because he frankly puts his life on the line for a corporation that does not pay him what he deserves, that's a hard thing to ask because they're being pulled in so many different directions and they may not have the same training that you and I do or that police officers do. So it starts there at a very base level, just reminding the security guards and the store employees to do these very basic steps if a crime is committed. And then if a crime is committed and the police give the report to me and I believe beyond a reasonable doubt I can file some sort of theft charge or a trespass or a battery, I will file that and I'll see the case through from the very beginning to the very end. And of course, this is the same person who is not going to comply with the probation terms. This is the same person who is going to do his 180 days in jail and quite frankly a lot less because the jails are overcrowded and he's going to be right back out on the streets. So I usually will work with a whole variety of agencies from the Department of Mental Health to even the public defenders to craft a disposition that makes sense for that person. So with Lucifer, for instance. Not only was he incarcerated for the last, I think, 3 or 4 months, he had a very thoughtful public defender who worked with me to find a solution where we didn't have to bring him into the court the 14th time. And so we got him into a lockdown mental health facility that focused on both mental health and a pretty nasty methamphetamine addiction, in addition to getting his family involved, tracking them down, in addition to getting him housing after that 6-month stint in rehab. So that all seems pretty obvious thing to do, and it is. But in an overburdened criminal justice system where we're all running around and we have a million things to do, taking those 3 days of work to sit down and really think about what is going to be the best interest of society and the best interest of this person to stop the behavior, that's when I really dig in. And so I just end up having a much smaller amount of much more complicated cases that require weeks of effort just for one defendant, as opposed to the typical, hey, there's my guy in court, here's the offer, and if we have to go to trial, so be it, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. We really try to dig into who this person is, where are their family, can we get in contact with them, let's hook them up with the right services, what's the right treatment plan, and how do we make sure the problem goes away if possible. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But if it doesn't work, we just go back to the drawing board and try again.
How's it work with Lucifer?
Not well. He's back. He did his 1 month, and I've received 3 calls now in the last 2 days saying he's now back in front of the 7-Eleven. So part of my job is also to arm the police and the store employees and the store owners with information. Hey, remember this guy from 5 months ago? Well, he disappeared for a while, but here are his probation terms, right? Here's what the probation terms mean. If he is, like I got a 1,000-yard stay away from the intersection of Ventura and Vineland for him. So he's violating his probation if he's within 1,000 yards.
She's at her condo.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you this on it. So let's say I come in contact with Lucifer and maybe there's 2 other ones that are constant. I'm a very nice person. You could do whatever you want to me because I'm a human being. You touch my dog, I'll hurt you. That is he's my French bulldog, he's my baby, okay? And a couple of them have attempted to kick him because they're crazy. I know they're crazy, One actually got him, and my first instinct was to, excuse me, do you mind? I literally grabbed
Everyone turn away. We don't want any witnesses.
That's my
Please,
dog.
cameras off, please.
I'm crazy when they touch my dog.
I believe you.
That's been established. We're
The
good.
New Yorker in me, So I grabbed him and I went like this. And luckily, one of the Walgreens guys, because they know me, I'm in there, they know my dog. Alistair's the mayor of Walgreens, and he grabbed my arm and said, if you hit this guy, he's not going to jail, you are. Is that true? Because I don't think so.
Well, so it's case by case, right? I mean, if you're trying to protect your property and you use reasonable force, I'm not going to go to jail for that. That doesn't mean you may not be convicted at trial for that. But if he then said, I want to request a private person's arrest for that woman who battered me, you're going to go to jail. That's how it
They're
works.
just crazy enough to do it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
They probably don't know that, but yeah.
I kind of think a couple of them do know what they're doing. I really do, because they are there, and I mean,
That corner
it's just
is
like,
Yeah.
serious.
No, and we've been trying to work on that, and that's an embedded issue that is not going to go away anytime soon. Part of the issue is you're right by the red line, and you're just down from North Hollywood Park, and there's a community of people who encourage folks to seek handouts in that area.
Yeah, they tell their buddies. They said we've got warm hearts. That's what the officers told me. I was telling them earlier. They said, stop giving them money. They know that Studio City, there's money there. we're warm hearts, we care, we want to help.
And that's lovely. That's a lovely thing.
Right,
But it also creates an incentive where when Lucifer goes away, or there's another gentleman who's locked up Twin Towers right now awaiting a felony trial, there's a vacuum that is created and more people are going to come in. So sometimes some intersections are always going to be bad intersections, particularly when you have a lot of retail and you have a lot of handouts and you have a relatively low population of other people there, and especially if there's an easy escape route right at the MTA line 400 yards away.
Todd, let me ask you, if you want to start with what's the bad news, and then maybe share some good news.
So there's not a lot of bad news, I have to say. In terms of if we take a step back, look, if you're on Nextdoor, if you're on Facebook, it feels like the sky is falling. You get to see now, tangibly, proof that there was a burglar at my neighbor's house. That's his image on camera, and he's creepier looking than I thought he would be. We're a lot more well-informed and social about our crime than we were 5 years ago, let alone a decade or more ago. And so you see this on social media all the time, and it little drives me up a wall a little bit. I hear people, it's worse than ever. It's never been this bad. Yeah, and you know what? That's totally wrong. I don't want anyone in this room to say that ever again.
I think it's worse than ever.
Please don't.
I really do. I'm not believing anything you're saying.
Okay.
Because I'm personally observing it, and I'm talking to the police officers, and the police officers are telling me that as well.
Okay, so
you come in here and you say, well, let's look at the data. I'm a data nerd. That's fine. But if your data is flawed, and everybody in the community is saying it's worse than ever, then something's not in sync.
Okay, so that means you're assuming the data's flawed, and you want to believe that it's worse than ever.
No, I just base it on my own experience.
Yeah,
I
but
base it on what everybody else is talking.
Yeah, so I don't mean to push back on you, but that's anecdotal, and I like moving away from anecdotal.
I like to observe what's actually going on rather than have someone come in here and tell me it's not as worse than ever.
Okay, great.
It just does not seem right to me.
How many burglaries have you personally witnessed yourself in the last 6 months?
Personally witnessed?
You've been at a home and you saw someone trying to break in.
No, I haven't personally observed any home invasion. I've been the victim of 3 crimes in the last 6 months. I don't let my kids go down to CVS and Vaughn's at night because it's too dangerous. Because we've got people assaulting people, and I've been assaulted myself in the parking lot.
Yeah, and I can't.
So,
and I can't take that away.
I'm just telling you, I've lived in Studio City for 20 years, and I will tell you, based on my observation, it's worse than ever.
Great. I respect that. And if that's the way you feel, I'm not going to change your opinion here.
It's not the way I feel. I'm just observing. I wish I didn't feel that way.
Yeah, me too. I really do. But I think we live in an era where it feels like we're inundated all the time with this crime and that crime and that crime. But when you look at historical crime trends, we are near the very bottom in the last 40 to 15 years in terms of both violent crime and property crime per capita. And that's not just in the US, that's also here in California. Now, things have ticked up in the last few years, and quite frankly, we don't have good data for 2016 and 2017. But crime, both in the nation and in most of California, particularly here in LA, bottomed out on a per capita basis. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't more crime per capita in Los Angeles than, let's say, Mill Valley or in Burbank. So that may be some of what you're feeling, where even though historically, on a per capita basis, crime is less than half of what it was in the 1980s. Truly less than half of what, violent crime is basically half of what it was in the really bad areas of the 80s and 90s, and property crime is down by 2/3. And yet we still live in an environment where on a per capita basis, LA is going to have more crimes than maybe more affluent, smaller communities. So the good news. And look, if you think the data's flawed and you don't believe it, I'm not going to convince you otherwise.
Just because of the observation, everyone I talk to, and talking to the police officers.
Okay.
Why is it that the police officers are saying that, when, at least when I talk to them, when I go to North Hollywood Station and I talk to them, they complain about Prop 47. They say the reason that there's this uptick is Prop 47, you're letting people out. There's an overcrowding of the jail, so people are let out early onto the streets.
Which is true.
As a result of, and we don't have the resources to basically handle the smaller crimes, so we don't handle it.
Yeah, that's all.
And,
That's all
you know,
true.
I've had that experience. I've had smaller crimes committed against me, and they just haven't had the resources to handle it. So I'm
Same.
sympathetic to the police. I do think they need more resources. I do think that your effort to try to get, you know, more officers is great. I'm skeptical of the idea, and I've heard this before, and, you know, sometimes I get concerned that politics drives some of this, but I've heard this before that, you know, crime is, you know, it's not so bad and it's, there's a trend down. It just doesn't, the people that I talk to do not seem to be feeling that. So I'm not trying to give you a hard time about it. I'm just saying, based on my experience and all of the folks that I talk to, does not seem to be the case.
Well, a lot of people aren't reporting the crimes. I mean,
We're worried about
And that's why I say the data may be flawed.
Yeah.
Because if people aren't reporting the data and you're looking at data that doesn't reflect what is going on in the community, what good is the data?
Are you saying that people used to report crimes but now they don't?
Well, it used to be a lot easier than it is now.
Yeah. No, it's a pain in the butt to report crimes now. You have
So they
to.
don't do.
Longer wait times
Yeah.
in the police station due to understaffing. The phones are not being answered. Filling out the paperwork. We're Patty and I are hearing quite a few stories of you know, and the crime is not that serious nature that I'm not going to go there for 6 hours and deal with that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Are you saying that this Lucifer, or that stereotype, is only going to be arrested if he commits a violent crime? So in other words, he's mentally ill.
No. I'm not saying
He
that.
is mentally ill. Would you say this guy is mentally ill?
Absolutely.
Okay, so at what point does he actually get arrested for his actions?
When he commits a crime, violent or not,
Any crime?
any misdemeanor or felony crime.
The question is, when does he go to jail? That's.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah.
That is the question.
Here's the issue right now, and let me.
And for how long?
Well, it's case by case, but so right now, where are we at now? So the jail population, the best numbers I have right now, and don't quote me exactly, like, you know, to a T, but it's about 16,500 inmates in LA county jails right now, run by the sheriff's department. 16,500 people throughout all of LA County, either awaiting trial or post-sentencing or waiting to be shipped off to prison.
But they're incarcerated.
They're incarcerated. The capacity for all of LA County jails, 11,000. Maybe 12,000 on a good day, depending on whether one facility up north is open. So that is what, 40, 50% overcapacity? And I don't have perfect numbers in terms of, well, if you have this bail amount in this sentence, you'll serve X percent of your time. But I can tell you anecdotally that I've had plenty of people sentenced to 180 days. There's a serial thief that is driving me insane. And he's smart. He'll go into a supermarket and he'll take just under the $950 amount, which would make it a felony, and he'll steal just under that, take a bunch of medication. He's not a good thief, and he gets caught a lot, all the time. Everyone knows him. He's an awful thief, and he cops out to it. Yes, I was stealing, and I did it because I wanted to sell it on the street, and I'll do it again. Great. He will walk into arraignment court on a very low bail amount and say, I'll plead guilty. I'll take the maximum, which means I don't have probation terms. I don't have a stay-away order. I don't have restitution. I don't have anyone bugging me to search me if they stop me. I'll take 180 days, and literally, the last time he was in, it was last week, he walked out the same day he pled guilty because his bail amount was very, very low, and the crime, petty theft of some medication from Gelson's, I think it was, paled in comparison to some of the nasty people that the sheriff's department had to hold. So I don't know how the sheriff's department does it or what metrics they use, but anecdotally, I know I say I don't like using anecdotes, but that's one example of, yeah, I'm not getting the holds I want. Sometimes I can if I'm able to really work a case and raise the bail amount and the person doesn't want to plead guilty right at arraignment. And I'm going to do a sentencing next week for a guy I have on $100,000 bail who's been a terror to his neighbors. And he's going to do a much bigger chunk of time because of that. But it's really, 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 really hard to keep people in custody for relatively minor crimes. They may not seem relative to the store owner or to the person that has their dog kicked, But compared to the attempted murderers and the drug dealers and the sex offenders who are sitting in LA County jails, they're a much lower tier of people, particularly for a jail system that's 50% over capacity. And I'm not making excuses for the sheriff's department. I think it's ridiculous.
What
but
is that data on violent crime in terms of what this gentleman is talking about? In other words, is violent crime increasing? Is it up? And are people going to jail for more than 180 days for violent crimes?
Well, so violent crime is a whole swath of stuff. And it really depends. Some people will go to prison, not just local jail, but prison for life for the violent crimes. And some people will get credit for time served and probation because their violent crime, which technically falls into the violent crime category, if we all looked at it, we'd be like, it's not really that bad. So it changes. What I will say is this, just anecdotally, the sheriff's department is doing a better job holding people on your more serious crimes. The reason they, at least in their reports, the reason they release the lower level misdemeanors is so they can hold the violent felons for a longer time. So they don't just let them skirt on their sentence. They try to hold them for as long as possible.
Todd?
Yeah.
The retail employees that are terrorized by some of these, are they permitted to use pepper spray or some sort of innocuous defense device against petty theft, that sort of thing?
You're allowed to use reasonable force to defend your property or yourself. And what the definition of reasonable is totally changes in the circumstances. So, but you also have to keep in mind that a lot of the loss prevention officers and security guards have basically been told by their employers, if it's a $30 case of beer, let it go. Life is too short and we don't need a lawsuit because you tackled a guy and he broke his neck. Or you got hurt and now you're going to be on disability for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Sir?
Dumb question, John. So the amount of $30 cases of beer that have been stolen now versus in the 80s, is it the same?
It's a lot lower now.
How do you have the data if they let them out? If the store owners are told just leave them be?
Because so I can't tell you the percentage of lower level petty thefts that go unreported now versus 30 years ago. I just cannot tell you that data. It does not exist. I've never seen it. If anyone has seen it, please let me know. But in terms of reported crime, and let me give you the numbers. If you want to talk just about property crimes, so those would be your window smashes of a vehicle where you take someone's bag out of it. Those would be your vehicle thefts where someone drives off and does a little joyride and your car's found in Foothill Division 3 days later, the window's down. Those would technically be your residential burglaries, whether someone's home or not. And those would also cover all the other thefts. Someone takes a lawnmower from your yard. Someone steals a case of beer from Walgreens. All of those type of crimes that don't necessarily involve using violence against someone, they just take stuff. So this is the way the crime statistics are reported. So they're reported on a per capita basis for 100,000 people. For every 100,000 people, how many property crimes are committed? So in California, in the, call it early to mid 70s, it was 5,800 property crimes for every 100,000 Californians. Right, so for every 100,000 of us, there would be 5,800 property crimes.
In a 12-month period?
In a year. In the 1980s, that spiked up to just under 7,000. So from 5,800 to, call it 6,800. Pretty substantial increase there. That is now down to, in California at least, to about 2,500 property crimes for every 100,000 people. That is about a third, or a little bit more than a third of what it was at peak.
Do they have it broken down by Studio City then?
North Hollywood. Remember before I was trying to struggle, I had another data point, and this was it. North Hollywood Police Division and Van Nuys Police Division, out of the 7 Valley bureaus, are 1 and 2 for per crime capita. Exactly this.
I mean,
Yeah.
high?
The highest.
Highest?
Yeah.
But crime per capita is going to change because the population is much larger now than it was 30 years ago.
Of course. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, and so when you see crime trends, there were 290 murders in LA last year, about 280, 290, 300-ish, and most of those are gang related, by the way. And you'll see, well, the number of murders seems to be ticking up each year. It goes up by a couple. Well, on a per capita basis, you're actually less likely to be murdered, particularly if you're not a gang member. So yeah, so the per capita numbers take population growth into account.
Correct, but
Yeah.
what he's saying is there are 58 people dead now instead of 50 people dead 30 years ago, because there's more people to be killed.
That's correct.
Well, doesn't make you sleep better at night.
No, and it may not. And you may say, look, I'm just as afraid because we haven't expanded our area of where the crimes are happening. It's not like Studio City has grown by, 70% since the 1980s, just like the population has.
I have a question that goes to this, because what you're obviously doing, you're a prosecutor and a judge, and you're talking about this issue from a prosecutorial policing aspect. How do you feel about the rest of it, the social aspect of it? Because we have so many more homeless, population problem has exploded, and from what I was hearing, what we were discussing during the break was it's whack-a-mole. Glendale and Burbank are pushing people into NoHo, and who knows. So there's so many other, and particularly with the opioid crisis, right on top of the whole thing, isn't that problematic for you? I mean, it seems like you're going backwards. I mean, you can't police your way out of this problem.
Yeah, it's really frustrating because, this is the meeting I was just at. It was Assistant Chief Moore said this is the crisis of our generation. This is the humanitarian crisis of our generation. And I think you can just look out on Ventura Boulevard, pretty much, literally one of the nicest, best kept, wealthiest streets in all of the San Fernando Valley, let alone Los Angeles. And it is rampant with people who are very clearly mentally ill, who very clearly have substance abuse issues, and very clearly don't have a home to go to, even though it's going to be very cold tonight and it's going to be pouring rain. We can't handcuff our way out of this problem, right? This is not we're just going to arrest all 60,000 homeless people on the streets and pay $70,000 a year to incarcerate them, and good luck with that. That's not a solution that has worked before, and I'm not a politician, but I think you've seen the pendulum swing in a different way, where our society has said, look, this has been an issue that's been brewing for the last 40 years. Whenever we've had an issue with people being poor, people having mental health issues, people having substance abuse issues, let's just lock them up. And we're willing to pay $70,000 a year to do that. So let me give you some statistics. In the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, the prison population in California was about 20 to 25,000 people. So even though our population was growing, the prison population kind of stayed relatively consistent. From 1980, where we had about 24,000 people incarcerated in prison, and prison's different from local jail. Prison's serious stuff, right? You don't want to go to prison. That's like you did a really, really bad thing. You didn't just kick a dog, you hurt a dog bad. You didn't just punch a person, you blew out their orbital socket and that person's blind now. You killed someone, you raped someone, you robbed someone. Bad stuff. In California, we had a prison population of about 24,000 in 1980. That jumped to a peak of 172,000 by 2006. Right, what is that? Is that about a sevenfold increase? And I will tell you, our population did not go up 7 times in that relatively short window of time. Our incarceration rate per 100,000 people went from for every 100,000 people in 1980, 100 of them were in prison. That jumped about 5 times by 2007. It's about 470 people were incarcerated for every 100,000 people. It's a 5 times increase. And obviously that was in reaction to the spiking crime rates you saw in the 80s and particularly in the 90s. So to talk about some of the data, and I do appreciate both your points, which is, look, even on a per capita basis, we still live in the same neighborhood. So if there's more crimes in the same neighborhood, that doesn't make me feel any better, even if less people are being affected by crime. Because I still see it at the market. My kids still have to see it at the retail stores. But violent crime, which is essentially murders, rapes, robberies, and things called aggravated assaults, which are essentially an assault where a weapon is used, where it strikes someone or not, like a gun, a knife, taser, pepper spray, or an assault where someone's actually battered and hit, and there's a substantial injury to that person, right? Like, I would not do well in a fight with you, I suspect. You've got size and probably good reach on me. If you hit me in the face, that would be a battery. That would not be an aggravated assault. But you hit me in the face hard enough where I lose consciousness, or I break a bone, or I lose eyesight, that would be an aggravated assault. That counts as violent crime. So rapes, murders, robberies, aggravated assaults. It was about, for every 100,000 people, in 1970, it was about 470 violent crimes for every 100,000 people. That spiked, more than doubled, to over 1,000 violent crimes for every 100,000 people.
In California?
In California. This is all California stats. I will tell you, the stats as you get more and more on a local level are not great. Like, so for instance, we know how many crimes happen in the North Hollywood division every single year, and we can even break that out by Studio City. At least reported, that's right. But in terms of what the population is at any point in time, I've run the numbers myself. I don't feel comfortable stating them in public because I don't trust that the population data is quite accurate. So on a per capita basis, it's very, very, very hard to figure out what it was. Like I've been running the numbers. I'm a nerd, truly. Like on the weekends, I get up early while my wife's still asleep, and I run these per capita numbers. I'm not joking with you. I could show you my spreadsheet.
I'd love to see it.
I don't feel comfortable sharing it because it's garbage in, garbage out. It really is. The per capita numbers in North Hollywood and Studio City fluctuate materially, even with a relatively small move in the population, just because they're, you have two small numbers, and when one of them moves, the ratios change a lot. So I don't feel comfortable sharing that.
Last year at this time, year to date, there was 0 murders. This period in North Hollywood PD, there are 2. So we're up 200%.
We're up infinite percent, right? We're literally up an imaginary percent that's so high you can't calculate it. Right, so that's a little garbage in, garbage out.
But all the numbers the California numbers are aren't they based upon the numbers that you get from each of these separate, smaller entities?
Yes, and we know the state.
So doesn't that mean that all the numbers might be suspect then if the components of the larger numbers?
It's not that the components are suspect, it's just that when people run the numbers more on population, for instance, on larger levels than they do here in Studio City. So I have population estimates for Studio City once every time the census is done, and that's about it. But you can just look out the window, and since the time of the last census, how much building has been done? How many more large-scale residential developments have been done in Studio City alone? Forget North Hollywood. Like, go to the Arts District. That place has exploded. Yeah. Have 5,000 more people moved in or 50,000? I cannot tell you, and no one can give me a good number.
Are you getting your data from the DOJ Uniform Code?
Yeah, you can get the data from the DOJ, LAPD, and a variety of other national organizations. Bureau of Labor Statistics has a couple things. California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation has a lot of good numbers. They're not all in one place, unfortunately. You think they would be. The things I'm throwing out are the most basic stuff we hope we would know, right? On a per capita basis at a more local level, how bad are we? And we don't have that. But let me just finish with a couple things. So violent crime doubled by the time you got to the early 1990s. And it's now essentially back down to what it was when this whole crime epidemic started with gang violence and a few other issues in the 1980s. So on a California basis, we started at 470 in 1980. We're back down to essentially the same level, maybe a little bit below it. And to put that in perspective, so North Hollywood's per capita rates are probably around where California's at, in that 400 to 450 level. Studio City's going to be lower. They're probably in the low to mid 300s, so 300-ish violent crimes for every 100,000 people. I can't give you a specific number. Again, garbage in, garbage out on the population data. But for LA as a whole, so on a per capita basis, LA's violent crime rates right now are, compared to California's at about 450 for every 100,000 people, are probably in the high 600s, low 700s, thereabouts. So LA as a city is much more violent on a per capita basis than the rest of the state. North Hollywood, and particularly Studio City, are much safer than the rest of LA, and Studio City is safer than the average place in the state. Not that it makes you sleep better at night, but just on a where were we in terms of violent crime spikes in the 80s and 90s, gang injunctions, and where have we gone to now? And property crimes are what I expect. Property crimes are essentially down by about 60% from the highs in the 90s.
What's the correlation between homelessness and violent crime?
We don't know. Really. I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal stuff. It's like, we don't know.
It needs to be done.
It's,
Study.
well, it's hard.
That's
Yeah.
kind of mind-blowing because
yeah.
the homeless issue, I mean, it's exploded
Yeah.
in terms of the presence of homeless people. And I'm certain, I'm correct, that the vast majority of them are mentally ill, and most of the population feels that that's benign, but you can't tell whether a person's going to be psychopathic or not. So are they studying that? Is anybody pulling that together?
There are, but I don't want to, and I have data, but I don't feel comfortable sharing it because it's very preliminary, and it's, when you have 1 year of data with a small sample, like it's not a trend. Look, I think we all feel it, and I think a lot of people talk about this with Prop 47. I can't say that Prop 47 or mental illness or homelessness is causing this, but I do notice a change. And I don't have my eyes closed. And so when I see a guy covered in his own feces trying to take a swing at someone on the corner just for walking by, that feels new to me. And that feels violent and it feels different. And I just can't quantify that right now. And I can't tell you how much of that is people who are dual diagnosis, who both have a substance abuse issue and mental health. If they are dual diagnosis, was it a pre-existing issue with methamphetamine, or did that develop because they've been mentally on the streets for 5 years and they use that to cope with awfulness of living in a ditch? I just can't give you that information yet because people haven't dug into it. Like, we have great information on gangs because it was a huge issue for the last 30 to 40 years. And so people spend a lot of time studying it. But homelessness, and to your point earlier, we've ignored homelessness for a very, very long time. And for a whole bunch of reasons, LA is now the epicenter. LA and New York City are now the epicenter of the nation's homelessness crisis. And we just don't have great data to begin to deal with it. We know how many times a homeless person or an alleged homeless person has committed a violent crime. We know whether that homeless person commits a violent crime against a non-homeless person or against another transient or homeless person.
What do you mean by alleged homeless person?
Sometimes you just don't know because homelessness is complicated, right? Is someone who lives in their camper homeless, right? If they've been living in that camper for 2 years?
They're homeless.
I mean, technically, according to LASA, they are. But if that's their permanent home, is that truly a homeless person? What if they're living in their neighbor's garage? And it was supposed to be a temporary thing, but has now continued for the last couple years. Probably count as...
Loss of statistics.
Yeah, but...
If they were unsheltered or considered living in their home for the 2 weeks out of the last month, then they're considered homeless.
Absolutely, and that's from just a true definitional standpoint. But to the question you're asking, we're less concerned about the guy who's struggling to make it, who lives in his car but holds down a job and just drives to work and drives back and doesn't bother anyone. And he just can't pay $1,500 a month and his alimony and his kids' medical bills on top of working a junky job in an environment where rents are skyrocketing. So do we really want to include that homeless person in data about, I think, the homeless folks you were talking about, the folks that are roaming our streets?
I think that's fair enough, I agree with you. But on the other hand, somebody's got to look at this with a microscope and find out what are those statistics in terms of violent crimes and the coefficient with homelessness, the kind we're talking about, not living in an RV somewhere, because that in and of itself can be a flashpoint to make something happen in terms of dealing with the laws that allow people to live on the streets, in tents, in people's yards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also an issue of the safety of the public.
I agree with you.
All right, let's keep it a little more focused and we'll start to wrap this up. Are you in the field in Studio City on a daily basis, weekly basis? Are you out here for incident?
It totally depends. I was up on Sunshine Terrace and Eureka Drive and Hendley today dealing with a longtime hoarder who has been hellish on our office. We'd had 15 years of criminal cases against this person who was not, he's a gentleman in his 80s. He is actually a really nice guy, but he drives his neighbors bananas because he is a hoarding complex and has garbage spilling out of his property and refuses to clean it up. So I was up here dealing with that all day today, and I may not be back in Studio City for a week, depending on where I'm getting pulled. Like, I'm the only neighborhood prosecutor for about 250,000 people. So I can't be in the field as much as I'd like, and I can't tackle every quality of life issue. I basically have to pick and choose kind of a list that I've had a chance to develop and say, okay, so what is truly the worst of the worst? What is the most violent and affects the most people? Or has just been unsolvable for the last decade? And I'll try to tackle that first, and I slowly will start to go.
Now,
down
when
the
do you
list.
want to hear from members of the community? Is it Karen and what she's dealing with at that corner to be updated?
Yeah,
What should cross your plate?
Yeah, let me know. Like, I may tell you, please report this to LAPD. Thank you for the heads up. I'll keep this on my radar. Doesn't mean if you say, hey, there's a nutty guy on the corner of Ventura and Vineland, I'm like, well, join that. There's 50 other people there as well. But, I appreciate the heads up. And it may be a thing where I'll say, you know what, thank you. There's 4 people who've emailed me about that in the last month, and I did a little research, and he was not on my radar. He's not on the police radar. So it doesn't hurt to email me. And again, if there's a homeless guy in a tent under the bridge, and I dialed 311 and they haven't come in 2 weeks, like, I'm happy to respond to that, but that may not be the best use of my time, particularly because you have a council member and entire city agencies who should be responsible to you and should be able to go solve that. Because that is not a put him in handcuffs, let me prosecute him in court issue, unless there's something else going on with that person living under the bridge. So what else is, be liberal in how you reach out to me. I sent some cards around. If there's not enough, I'll get more.
Leave it right here. Miss Donaldson, Elise Donaldson, went through a horrific crime just last month. She was sharing it with us, the home invasion. He's been arrested. What are you going to do about it?
Is that the home invasion where a gentleman? So, yeah, Was it this? He attacked a woman and beat her up pretty.
That's right here.
She's right there in the blue.
Right. First of all, I'm very sorry you had that happen to you. Yeah. So.
Was that aggravated assault?
Well,
She was hurt.
so he's charged with incredibly serious felony crimes. They're so serious that the city attorney doesn't even deal with it. That's the district attorney. He's facing, if convicted of the crimes, an incredibly lengthy sentence. So because a lot of stuff is not, you obviously know firsthand exactly what happened. A lot of stuff is not public, so it's inappropriate for me to talk about it. But you know the charges that he's facing.
I know some, I don't know great detail. Again, the detective didn't go into great detail with me, and I understand that, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because that, whatever needs to be preserved for prosecution is great. But, yeah, I got the sense that it was going to be fairly serious times.
I will tell you, I'm personally, let me take my prosecutor hat off and I'll put my community member hat on right now. I'm not really happy with the way that minor crimes are dealt with, because the crime may be minor relative to the awfulness you had to go through. Like, I'm actually going to choke up a little bit thinking about it. But they're not minor to the people that go through them. I've been the victim of crime too. I've had my car stolen. I've had my car windows smashed and stuff taken out of it. And it was junk that was taken out of it. But you know what? Like, I don't feel safe anymore. And that's how I feel. And it's people have gone through 10 times worse than I have. So I understand why that when jails are at 150% of capacity in LA, why some of the more minor folks have to be let go so that the truly awful and violent people stay in custody. But what I will say from an anecdotal perspective, and this is both as a misdemeanor and as a serious and violent felony attorney who prosecuted those awful people and sent people away for a very, very long time to prison, our justice system is focused on those type of crimes. That's why the justice system was created, right? For murderers and robbers and people doing the worst of the worst. And over the last couple hundred years, we've added to a very small list of crimes that truly affected people, and now it's illegal to have a redwood fence that's unpainted in the city, right? But our justice system is still geared towards preserving the peace by making sure that those who commit the most heinous crimes are held accountable. And I don't even get to deal with them anymore because they're not misdemeanors. They're serious and violent felonies, strike felonies, felonies where you may go to prison for life. So from that perspective, our justice system, I think, in my opinion, based on what I've seen and how I've prosecuted, how I see the police, and I sit in with the detectives in North Hollywood, they have a really great focus on the crimes that truly shock a community. Because they're humans too, right? And they know that I don't want this to happen to my community, I don't want this to happen to my wife or my children or my son. So they do a great job. In those cases, they make them a priority. Not that they don't for other cases, but they put that to the very top of the list and work their butts off and have a whole bunch of really smart people, smarter than you could ever imagine, for civil servants, digging into these cases and making sure people are held accountable and going to court whenever they need to go and talking with the DA to make sure that that person is truly held accountable. There's no snafu.
I would like to say that is the sense I had from the moment somebody showed up at my house until I got the call saying that he'd been arrested. It felt like every resource they had available was focused on bringing that criminal to justice. So, you know, I have nothing but great respect for their efforts and their time.
Good. After the case is done, you'll have a chance to sit down with the detectives, and I think you'll be very surprised to see how thoughtful they were and diligent they were in the investigation. I can't say anything more than that, but they did a bang-up job.
Just a quick overview. First question is Proposition 4757 a state or city law?
State. So that's a proposition voted on by the California voters. That's a proposition where the legislature, if I'm not mistaken, can't overturn it. So the voters literally have to do it by referendum at the ballot box.
Okay, that was my second.
Yeah. And by the way, so on Prop 47, the one thing I wanted to point out, you can all see that the number, so bottom line with Prop 47, 57 we have no data on right now in terms of has that led to spikes in violent crime or anything like that.
Just real quickly show what the difference between 47 and 57.
Thank you.
Prop 47 was passed by voters overwhelmingly in 2014. It was one of the ballot initiatives, just like, hey, we should ban plastic bags. That was one of the initiatives in 2014. And it is part of a long trend of voters in the legislature moving to reduce the prison population. And I know we're getting a little bit late.
Yeah, but I think we should start to wrap this up. Everyone's been here for a while.
Yes, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry for being late.
We covered other things in the meeting.
No, and just so you know, the California prison population, when it hit its peak, the federal government actually intervened and said, this is, you're way over capacity. Right, your capacity is about 90,000 people, and you have essentially double that. That's an Eighth Amendment cruel and unusual punishment violation. You cannot shove all these human beings into the same cell, even if they did bad things. You need to materially reduce your prison population. That's why you've heard of things like AB 109, which is also called, well, let's not get into details, but AB 109 essentially shifted a lot of state prisoners, nonviolent state prisoners, into local custody. And right now, 40%, I'm sorry, that's not correct. Let me make sure that's right. 20% of the local LA jails are made up of AB 109 prisoners who pre-2011 would be in state prisons, right? So 20% of that 16,000-ish number would normally have been in state prison at $70,000 a year to incarcerate them pre-2011. That's been a good number of people have been shifted to local custody here in jails. Prison population has gone from about 170,000 to a little under 130,000 now. So that's about 40,000 less people in prison. A lot of those are on the streets, on parole, or they're in local custody now. And I totally lost my train of thought. But
violent criminals?
So violent criminals stay in state prison. Non-violent criminals, like your identity thieves, your drug dealers, the people who take joyrides in vehicles, assuming no one died or got hurt, those are your non-violent, non-serious criminals who would be housed here locally. Whereas rapists, murderers, people that knock out someone's eye, you go to prison for that and you stay in prison. But back to Prop 47. So Prop 47 was a tack on to AB 109, essentially, even though it was a voter referendum, because the federal government, the Supreme Court basically came back and said, all right, Governor Davis, you're doing a good job. You're not down to where we told you need to be. We'll give you an extension if you commit to doing a whole bunch of stuff, including focusing on rehabilitation instead of incarceration. And so, lo and behold, Prop 47 comes up and it says, okay, look, serial thieves, people that steal from more than 3 or more times, like you go into Rite Aid and you take that $30 case of beer, once, fine. Twice, that's not good. 3 times, that's now a felony. You got to do serious time. You're a serial thief. They essentially did away with that crime. That's always a misdemeanor, even if it's the 50th time you've stolen something. And for all theft-related crimes, including identity theft, check fraud, things like that, commercial burglary, if it's under $950, it's always a misdemeanor. It's only a felony if it's over $950, and even then it's usually only local custody time. The biggest change, the biggest headline, frankly, to me, that was the biggest change, which a lot of voters seem to pass over. So if I've had my guy go into Ralph's one more time and take $600 of medication, at max I can give him 180 days in jail, which he'll do 4. He's not a felon, and he doesn't get to serve a full, proper 3-year felony sentence. Almost all drug possession crimes were made misdemeanors, and that was a long time coming in the state, both from a voter popularity thing and also from some where the legislatures were going. So previously, if you were caught with methamphetamine, or you were caught with cocaine or heroin or other types of opiates, that would have been a felony, even if it was a relatively small amount, right? You're caught with 1 zany bar, you're caught with a gram of heroin, that's a lot, you're caught with a gram of methamphetamine, and we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt you knew you had it, then that would be a felony. And the voters passed something a while ago called Prop 36, which said we want to focus on rehabilitation. Hey man, if you do this rehab with a formal probation officer guiding you through the process, we will not send you to prison, or we will not send you to a long local jail term. Well, you can imagine the incentive to do drug treatment for folks who have significant substance issues when they know that drug possession crimes are now misdemeanors, and that you basically will get no time in custody if you're picked up with a meth pipe or meth or opiates. So those were the biggest changes in terms of Prop 47. Prop 57 was passed by voters 2016. Yep. And it essentially said, okay, we still need to get rid of some number of people in state prison to meet essentially what the federal court said we needed to get to, so that the federal courts don't take over our prison system and then they decide who they let out. So if you are a person who is in prison for a non-serious, non-violent felony, even if you had that stuff in the past, and because of how sentencing works, because of the bad stuff you did, even if your crime is just a normal non-violent felony now, you could still go to state prison, we're going to probably let you out a bit earlier. So that's essentially what Prop 47 did. It's a lot more complicated than that, but essentially said if you're in state prison for a non-serious, non-violent, non-sex felony, then you will have a much earlier chance at parole. And parole essentially says we're going to cut your sentence short and going to monitor you in the community to see if you can do well. It's kind of like probation. So that's 47 and 57. We don't have good data on crime rates in Prop 57, and quite frankly, it's going to take several years because the way it's being implemented is not particularly transparent. But basically, the state prison system has control over that, and there's documents online. They generally give guidance, but it's a case-by-case basis in terms of who is let out early on parole and who's not. And it's going to take a while for that to filter through the system. Prop 47 was passed in 2014. There's only been one decent study that isn't just, look, crime rates are going up. There was one study that was recently published by UC Irvine that only looked at 2015 data, not 2016, not 2017, literally 1 year of data. And they essentially concluded, we don't see a huge effect from Prop 47. There might have been an effect on larcenies, but it's not statistically significant. But again, that's just 1 year of data. Just to throw some numbers out. And I'll be done after this.
Could I just ask you a question? Why do you think then when you talk to the officers, they've just constantly talk about Prop 47 is really causing a spike, at least what they see on a day-to-day basis in the crime rates. Why do you think the officers say that?
I will leave that to the officers. Yeah. So let's talk about property crime in LA. So from 2014 to 2017, and that from just after Prop 47 passed to the most recent crime stats at the end of 2017, in LA City, vehicle thefts went from 14,000 to 19,000. Theft from motor vehicle, it's like the window smash and you take the laptop out, went from 24,000 in 2014 to 33,000. It's a little less than a 50% increase in just 3 years. And actually, larcenies didn't go up by that much, about 30 to 33,000 in that 3-year period of time. But it's going to be interesting. So the takeaways I want from Prop 47,
What is larceny again?
larceny is like stealing stuff, like theft.
Is it not the same thing as robbery?
No, robbery is when you go up to someone, a person, and use force or violence to take something from them. Whereas larceny is like, I took a lawnmower from someone's yard or beer from Ralph's.
And what about if you take a laptop from someone's car? If someone smashes in the window and takes a laptop?
That would be a theft from motor vehicle. Yeah, larceny is basically everything else that isn't stealing a car, stealing stuff from a car, or burglarizing a home. So anyway, I think the data is going to be very, very interesting in the coming years because just based on the numbers, and I'll let you guys draw conclusions from that. I mean, you have 5,000 more auto thefts per year in LA now. Literally, someone jumps in your car and drives. That's 5,000 more. And the base number isn't like 100,000, so it's a 5% increase. The base number is 14,000, and now we're at 19. That is a significant increase.
I'm confused. This is precisely the opposite of what you were saying earlier, this gentleman's concern, that these crime rate, these.
So crime rates are going up, but on a per capita basis, we're still at historically low. We're still very close to historical lows.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the trend is not good.
The trend right now is not good.
But shouldn't you be tracking the people who got early release? Are they coming back to do the crime? That's the whole point of the position, isn't it? They're released early, are they coming back and creating criminal action?
That's essentially Prop 57, and that's going to take many years to study. Prop 47 is not about early release. It's literally saying, we're not going to incarcerate you at all for these crimes now.
But why would that take many years? You've got to have, that information is available. The criminal is released in June. He comes back 3 months later and enacts the same crime again. That's data. That's information that's in a computer somewhere.
Yeah, I will tell you that makes sense as a rational, reasonable human being, but you're dealing with disparate systems that do not connect well, and there's also legality issues of tracking particular people on a state or national level.
But that's going to tell you whether or not the system works.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Yeah, we'll go have a beer and we'll talk about how much data I'd like to have. Yeah.
I think it's been a long night.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming out. Todd, thank you. Appreciate it. You have his card for any additional questions, concerns.